Right now, 54% of students are actively using AI for their schoolwork,
Hmm.
which is over half.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
It really is. But what's wild is that a staggering 81% of those kids report that their teachers have never explicitly taught them how to actually use it.
Right, they're just completely flying blind.
Exactly. Meanwhile, you've got 61% of parents and even half of high schoolers themselves who are actively worried that using AI is going to harm their critical thinking skills.
The anxiety is definitely there.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of that, half of all students are living in fear of being falsely accused of cheating, just because the rules are so incredibly ambiguous right now.
It's a mess.
It is a mess. We were watching a massive real-time social experiment unfold right in your living room, completely without a manual. So we're here to help you build one. This is Output, produced by Orbrya.
It really is a remarkable vacuum of guidance, honestly. And the anxiety you just mentioned, it is entirely justified.
For sure.
Because when you hand a developing mind a tool that can, instantly bypass the friction of learning, and you do it without establishing clear boundaries, you are effectively leaving that child to navigate a cognitive minefield completely alone.
Right. And bridging that exact gap is why we are here today. But just as a quick recap, in episodes 1 through 5, we laid out the groundwork, we established the cognitive risks of AI reliance, named the pause framework, and connected all of this to the massive economic stakes of the operator versus auditor economy.
Right. The stakes are very real.
Yeah. But today, we're shifting our focus entirely from theory to action. Today's deep dive is purely practical.
Exactly.
We're answering the central question: what does building that pause habit actually look like for your family? How do you make it stick in a K-12 household without it turning into, like, a daily battle?
Right, because giving them a lecture clearly isn't going to cut it.
Definitely not. So let's start with the foundation. Why are we so hyper-focused on daily habits? I mean, why can't we just sit our kids down, explain the pause framework to them once, and trust that they'll use it?
Well, it comes down to how the brain works. Metacognitive skills, the ability to think about your own thinking, to spot errors, evaluate truth. Those skills only work when they are reflexive.
Reflexive meaning automatic.
Exactly. Not just understood in theory, but reflexive. And we actually have some very sobering data showing what happens when those skills are not deeply ingrained.
Oh, the Michigan study.
Yes, there's a 2025 study by Fung and colleagues from the University of Michigan published in the AID Proceedings. It illustrates this perfectly.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So they looked at 102 students in a Python programming course just to see how they naturally interacted with AI.
So this is tracking what they actually do in the wild when nobody is hovering over their shoulder.
Right. Now, the good news was that students who proactively plan their AI use achieved better grades.
Which totally aligns with the plan step of the pause framework.
It does. But the deeply alarming finding was the evaluation phase.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Out of all the interactions these students had with the AI, only 8% involved actual evaluation.
Wait, really? Only 8%?
Just 8%. The vast majority of the time, they just reactively asked the AI to fix their code and accepted the output without checking the work.
I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around that. 92% of the time, these students were just taking the machine's word for it.
Pretty much, yeah.
I have to imagine that just comes down to our brains being fundamentally lazy, right? Like, the psychological path of least resistance is to assume the confident-sounding machine got it right.
That is the exact mechanism at play. Our brains are highly efficient energy conservation machines.
It takes calories to think.
It does. And if a tool offers to bypass that hard, calorically expensive work of evaluation, the brain will take that shortcut every single time, unless a stronger competing reflex is already in place. Now, I do have to put a giant asterisk on this study. This was just 102 students in a single Python course.
Okay, fair.
So we cannot take this precise 8% figure and generalize it to all students everywhere.
Right. I mean, a middle schooler writing an English essay might behave a bit differently than a college kid coding in Python.
Precisely. However, the underlying behavioral pattern it reveals is absolutely worth taking very seriously.
Because it shows the default human tendency.
Exactly. It proves that simply knowing you should evaluate an output isn't enough. The goal is not for your child to be able to perfectly recite the pause framework to you.
Right.
The goal is that they do it without being asked.
It reminds me of checking your blind spots while driving.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because when you're first learning to drive, checking your blind spot is this very clunky, conscious checklist item. Like, okay, now I must turn my head over my left shoulder.
Right, you're practically talking yourself through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But after a few years, you don't consciously recite those steps. You just look over your shoulder because it's become a physical reflex.
Friction just disappears.
Yeah, so I guess we're trying to make evaluating AI output a mental reflex in that exact same way.
That analogy hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
We have to install that mental reflex. But if closing the laptop and launching into a formal evaluation feels like a massive chore, the brain will resist it.
Sure.
So we need the absolute lowest friction way for families to start practicing the spot and evaluate steps of the pause framework right in the living room.
Okay, so what does that low-friction practice actually look like?
We call it the Explain It to Me test.
The Explain It to Me test.
Yeah, it's the simplest implementation of this entire framework. After your child completes any significant AI-assisted work, say an essay or a science summary, you simply ask them to close the document.
Just close it completely.
Close the laptop, put it face down, whatever, and then you just ask them to explain the material to you in their own words.
Just a quick chat.
Right, just 5 minutes of casual conversation, because those 5 minutes will reveal whether actual understanding formed or if only an output formed.
Okay, so if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a parent here, I imagine I'm listening for a totally flawless, highly polished regurgitation of the facts.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah, because if they can rattle off the dates of the French Revolution perfectly, that proves they learned it.
Actually, in an AI world, a flawless, highly polished answer is a massive red flag.
Wait, really? A red flag?
Yes. When you're having this 5-minute conversation, there are 3 specific markers you need to be listening for. And the first one is genuine stumbling and recovery.
So sounding slightly confused or hesitant is actually the goal.
It is. If your child pauses, searches for a word, or corrects themselves mid-sentence, like, wait, no, it wasn't the king, it was the assembly, that is a fantastic sign.
Why is that good, though?
Because it indicates actual structural understanding. It means a mental model is actively forming in their brain.
Oh, I see.
Building a mental model requires cognitive friction. So when they stumble and recover, you're witnessing their brain actively navigating that internal model in real time.
Which means they didn't just borrow the AI's thinking, they actually did the heavy lifting of synthesizing it themselves.
Exactly.
Wow, that completely flips the traditional metric of a good student totally on its head. So what happens if there is no stumbling? What if it's that flawless recitation?
That brings us to the second marker, word-for-word retrieval.
Okay.
If they're speaking with the exact cadence, vocabulary, and polished phrasing of a Wikipedia article, it is highly likely they only formed an output, not a mental model.
Basically, they just downloaded the text into their short-term memory.
Right, without fundamentally understanding the underlying concepts at all.
So they can read the map, but they have no idea how to actually navigate the city.
Exactly. And the third marker proves whether that map even exists in the first place.
Which is what?
Their inability to answer a follow-up question. If you ask something just slightly outside the scope of the paper, something simple like, wow, so how do you think the average peasant felt about that tax? And they completely freeze.
Then there's no mental model.
Exactly. No mental model was formed at all. Their knowledge is entirely brittle.
Look, in theory, this all sounds incredibly practical. But I have to step in with some genuine pushback here.
Go for it.
If I asked my 15-year-old to close their laptop and explain cellular respiration to me at like 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night when they just want to go to sleep, I am starting World War III.
Oh, absolutely.
How is this not just an interrogation disguised as parenting?
That is a very real, very valid concern, and it all comes down to your implementation strategy.
Okay, how so?
You cannot roll this out as a trap. If you only use the Explain It to Me test when you suspect they've misused AI, they will instantly recognize it as an interrogation.
And they'll immediately go on the defensive.
Right. You have to start doing this on work you already know is good.
Oh, so catching them doing something right rather than trying to catch them doing something wrong.
Precisely. You approach it with genuine curiosity. Hey, I saw you working really hard on that biology project, and honestly, I don't really get cellular respiration. Can you explain it to me?
So it feels low stakes.
Yes. When it becomes a regular low-stakes curiosity habit in your household, it normalizes the process of making their thinking visible.
It becomes a normal family routine long before it needs to become an intervention.
Exactly.
I like that. Validating their hard work while secretly forcing them to retrieve the information. But let's say even that gentle approach feels like too much friction right now.
Sure.
If closing the laptop still feels too much like a pop quiz, how do we hide the vegetables? How do we build this checking reflex without formal lessons?
If the formal check-in is causing friction, you pivot to play.
Play.
Yeah, you can build the exact same checking reflex through verification games. These are low-stakes challenges families can run to build the auditor habit seamlessly.
Okay, I love games. What's the first one?
The first one builds directly on a concept we discussed back in episode 1. We call it Spot the Lie.
How does spot the lie work in practice?
It's incredibly simple. You have the AI answer a question. It could be about a movie your family loves or a sports team. Then one person takes that output, actively plants a single false claim in the text, and the other person has to find the lie.
Oh, that's fun. You're basically teaching them to assume that any AI output is a slightly unreliable narrator. I can totally see kids getting into that because the power dynamic flips.
Yeah.
They get to try and sneak a subtle lie past their parents.
Right. And while they think they're just having fun trying to trick you, what they're actually doing is building approach with doubt as their default cognitive orientation.
They're reading to audit, not just to absorb.
Exactly. Which brings us to the second game, the citation race.
Okay, how does that one go?
After the AI makes any factual claim, you challenge your child to a race. Who can find the primary source for that specific claim online first?
Oh, that is brilliant, because it's like a digital scavenger hunt.
Yes, exactly.
And what's cool is, if you find the source, great. But if neither of you can locate a source anywhere on the internet, finding absolutely nothing is actually the winning prize.
Right, because it immediately exposes the jagged frontier of AI capabilities.
Let's unpack that term really quick for the listener. The jagged frontier.
Sure. It just means that the AI is highly capable at some incredibly complex tasks, but then fails miserably at seemingly simple ones.
Like, it can write a brilliant sonnet in 2 seconds, but completely fabricate a historical date.
Right, and when a child experiences that hallucination firsthand during a game, they stop treating the AI like an all-knowing oracle.
It shatters the illusion.
It does, which leads perfectly into the third game, the 1-minute debunk.
The 1-minute debunk.
Yeah, you generate an AI output, set a timer for exactly 60 seconds, and you try to find one thing in that text that is incomplete, outdated, or just worth questioning.
Just one thing. That is a very low bar.
The low bar is entirely intentional. The low bar ensures the checking habit is always rewarded with a win. You don't have to debunk a whole essay, just find one crack in the armor.
And a child who plays these games regularly at the dinner table isn't going to need to be reminded to verify their sources when they're alone in their bedroom.
Because the reflex is already installed.
But, we have to live in reality here.
Of course.
Let's talk about when the games and the gentle habits fail. We have to address the fact that AI misuse will happen. Kids get stressed, it's late, and the temptation to just push a button is literally right there.
Yes, it is inevitable.
So how a parent reacts in that specific moment is critical, right?
It's the pivotal moment in this entire journey. And what parents really need to internalize here is the sheer ineffectiveness of punishment alone.
Interesting. Why doesn't punishment work?
If you catch your child bypassing the learning process with AI, and your reaction is to just ground them or take away their phone, you haven't actually solved the core physiological problem.
Right, because grounding them doesn't magically build the neural pathways they skipped.
Exactly. Punishment alone does not rebuild the cognitive capacity the child bypassed. All it does is temporarily change their cost-benefit calculation.
Like, the risk of mom catching me is too high, so I'll stop for now.
Right. But it does absolutely nothing to close the capability gap in their brain. And worse, if they just view it as a cat and mouse game, they'll simply look for better ways to hide their AI use next time.
Okay, so if punishment doesn't work, what is the durable response? If a parent suspects their kid just AI generated their history paper, what's the actual playbook?
You start by deploying the tool we just talked about, the explain it to me conversation. You don't start with an accusation. You say, this is a really interesting paper. Can you walk me through your thought process on this paragraph?
And if they freeze?
If they truly cannot explain the work, the next step is not a punitive consequence. The next step is simply redoing a portion of the work, but with their thinking made visible.
Man, I can hear parents groaning through the speakers right now.
I know.
Redoing work sounds exhausting for the parent to monitor and infuriating for the child. How do we frame this so the child actually buys in?
It requires a fundamental reframing of the house rules. You must move your family's framework away from output control and toward process protection.
Process protection. Break that down for me.
Output control is saying you must produce this essay without using these forbidden tools because that's cheating. It focuses entirely on the final product.
And process protection.
Process protection is saying, in this house, AI is a research tool. It is a review tool. It's a flawed sparring partner. But it is not a thinking tool.
Ah.
You remind them that you are enforcing the rule to protect their physical, developing mind.
So you're treating cognitive offloading as an actual health hazard to their brain, not just a moral failing.
That is the crucial shift. A child who understands why the rule exists, that you are trying to protect their mind from atrophy, is far more likely to internalize it.
If they only see a rule to navigate around, they'll navigate around it. But if they realize you're protecting their intelligence, the buy-in changes entirely.
Completely. And, you know, when we look at the families who are successfully navigating this, they aren't running a formal curriculum at home.
Like they're not holding weekend seminars on algorithmic bias.
No, they are just having slightly different daily conversations. A child who is asked to casually explain their work 50 times over a school year naturally develops a permanent reflex.
They know they'll be asked, so they read the AI output differently from the start.
Exactly. A child who has played verification games is actively building the exact auditor habit that will matter in school, in the workforce, and honestly, anywhere AI produces confident-sounding outputs that need a human to check them.
And that window of opportunity is open for your family right now.
It is, and I'd love to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Please do.
If we successfully train this generation to be relentless, reflexive auditors of artificial intelligence, what happens when they turn that exact same auditing reflex onto everything else?
Wow.
By teaching them to audit the machine, we might accidentally be raising the most rigorously skeptical, critically thinking generation in human history.
That is an incredible reframing of the challenge ahead of us. It's not just about surviving AI. It's about using it as a training ground. You don't need a manual from a tech company. You have the tools to guide this journey in your own home, starting today. Thank you so much for joining us for the output produced by Orbrya. Keep asking the good questions, and we'll catch you next time.